Thank you, Madam Toastmaster. We are all fighting battles that nobody else knows about. Everyone is fighting a battle that we know nothing about. I was on a train. It was a Sunday morning. It was a quiet morning. The carriage was fairly full. And there were people reading the paper, some people listening to music, and others just quietly contemplating. I pulled into a station, and a man got on with two young children, maybe 7 or 8 years old. He sat down directly in front of me, and the children moved off along the carriage. He seemed lost in thought. As the train moved out of the station, the children began to run around in the carriage, boisterously pushing each other and making noise. It was beginning to disturb some of the passengers. I looked at the man and noticed that he didn't really seem to be paying any attention. He was deeply lost in his own thoughts. The train continued, and the children began pushing people. They knocked the newspaper out of the hands of one of the people that was reading. I began to feel really uncomfortable. So I leant over, said to the man, "Excuse me, sir. Do you think you could possibly control your children?" He came to, as if realizing in that first moment what had happened. And he said, "Oh, I'm sorry. I suppose I should do something about them. We've just come from the hospital. Their mother died this morning. I guess they don't know how to deal with it." In that moment, my entire impression of the situation changed completely. I no longer thought that the children were unruly. I wanted to reach out to the man and offer what I could do to help. That one piece of information changed my outlook on the whole situation. Everyone is fighting a battle that we know nothing about. Now, I borrowed this story from Charles Duhigg, who wrote the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. He used it to highlight the fact that we should seek first to understand and then to be understood. I like this story because it fits my own purpose, which is to say, we all view life through our own lens, through our own particular paradigm. How often do we take time to think about the other person's perspective? How often do we put ourselves in the other person's shoes and think about what may be going on in their life? Did I consider the man on the train? Did I consider what his perspective might be? Or did I only consider, you don't control your children? How many of you rely on other people to be successful in your work? I do. How many of you rely on other people to achieve anything in your lives? I do. How many of us have been let down by those people at any point? I have. And I judged them. I was starting a new project, and I was working with someone called Ella, and I'd heard great things about her. We had a couple of calls. She worked in a different location to where I am. And we were excited about how we were going to work on it. It was her 3rd or 4th time working on this particular type of work. And we agreed that because of the distance, we'd have a regular communication approach. We'd send emails every so often, we'd phone, we'd get in touch. And for the first 3 weeks, everything was fantastic. Things moved along well, the work progressed very well. And then something changed. Whereas she used to answer my every call, now it would go to voicemail every so often, or it would ring for a long time with no response. Emails would come at unusual times, sometime in an evening or a big flurry at 3 o'clock on a Sunday morning, as though she was in a different time zone. It became harder for me to do my job. It became harder for me to be successful in my work. And so I raised this with my boss. I tried different ways. I thought I was getting instant message to her, send extra emails. It got to the point where I had to copy her boss on all the emails to get anything done. This continued for a while, and eventually we got through the project. But I felt like I carried it all the way through. And at the end, when we were done, I heard one of my colleagues was about to start working with her. They said, oh, we're working with Ellen, we've heard she's great. And I couldn't help myself but think of my colleague and them being in the same position as I. So I let them know about my experience. I didn't say anything bad about her. I didn't curse her or be particularly rude. I tried to keep it professional, but I spoke about the challenges we'd had. Poor communication, things taking a long time. And my colleague went into their next engagement with Ellen already believing that. And they said right from the start, it was difficult. They didn't have the happy Ellen that I did. Has anyone here had a similar experience? Working with someone who is good and then something changes and it doesn't seem to be what you expect. A little while later, I found out the other side of this story. And remember, everyone's fighting a battle that we know nothing about. Ellen started the project excited as I was. She'd done this 3 or 4 times before. It was her bailiwick. She knew what it was that she was going to be doing. So we'd agreed. She said, yeah, let's have this plan. And about 3 or 4 weeks in, she had a miscarriage. With complications that meant she had to travel to a specialist 100 miles away. Every day she would drive to her mother, she would put her children with her mother, she would drive to the specialist and have treatment. And then in the evening she would try and catch up on the work she knew that she was missing. She spent time at the weekends catching up on these emails. The few times we had phone calls, she would make a comment about having other things going on, but didn't want to share that personal story. And didn't want to take the time to talk about something other than the work. The value was in the work. This continued all through the project. And she was working every hour that she could to manage both pieces. How often does this happen? How many of us consider the other perspective? It might not be a miscarriage, it might be a sick husband, a lost pet, a sick child, money troubles, personal problems, trouble conceiving. Battles can be big or small. Battles can mean different things to different people, but we all have battles at some point. We don't talk to all the people we work with about our problems, but we often expect others to align with our expectations. We often view others with our own particular paradigm, our own particular lens. So what can we do? What can each of us do about this? We can take a moment. We can pause. When someone acts in a way that is not what we expect, out of character with what we've been led to believe, pause. And think, is there something going on that I don't know about? Perhaps you can ask them, perhaps not. It might feel like prying. But pause. Take a moment. And remember that everybody is fighting a battle that we know nothing about. So be kind. AmeriToaster.
Thank you, Chris. You can take